Hey everyone, Mikee Rogers here, back with another tea session. In today's video, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of living in the city as well as the suburbs. Growing up, I lived in the suburbs with my family, but shortly after college, I moved to the city and lived there for 15 years. I even purchased my first condo living in that urban city atmosphere. Today, I find myself back in the suburbs, having sold my condo and living that suburban life again. Do I miss the city? Of course I do, but I also love living in the suburbs. And so in today's video, we're going to break down the 5 pros and cons of living in the city versus the suburbs. But before we get into it, this is the 3rd episode in this series. In the first one, we talked about the misconceptions of not being able to afford your first home. And then in the 2nd episode, I gave some tips on buying a new construction home. So if that sounds interesting to you, I'm going to leave links down in the description box below so you can check it out after this video. Alright, so with that said, let's get started with the pros of living in the city. Pro number 1, being able to walk to trendy restaurants, cafes, and bars. This was honestly my favorite perk of living in the city. You're just around all the cool restaurants, bars, and cafes. It was easy to go hang out with friends for a nice dinner out, especially after a long, hard day at work. Pro number 2, being around a lively atmosphere and community. Living in the city, you're filled with culture, the feeling of youthfulness, and having a more active social life. Also, there's just so many more events to attend, and I feel like that's a great way to enjoy the perks of our city. After all, we do pay a premium to live there, and so why do the tourists get to enjoy that more than we do? Pro number 3, apartment and condo living equals not a lot of maintenance. In the 15 years of living in the apartment and condos around the city, I can't remember any major maintenance issues I've had to deal with. Maybe a light bulb went out, you had to change the batteries on those pesky fire alarms, or dealing with a clogged drain here or there. Not bad if you ask me. Pro number 4, building amenities. Some buildings have pools, gyms, clubhouses, and other communal areas. Some even have commercial spaces where you might have a cafe or restaurant on the first floor. Ours had a really cool restaurant where you can order from, but aside from that, you can even just walk steps out across the street to other eateries and cafes. And regarding those building amenities, you better make sure you use them because you're definitely paying for them. And finally, pro number 5, a lot more housing options and opportunities. I honestly loved moving in the city because it was either moving to a new building or one with better amenities, or maybe one was in a better location, even if it was just a few blocks over. That feeling of starting a new, fresh chapter was always so exciting. I always felt like I was growing, evolving, and being able to reinvent myself in the city. Okay, so those were the pros of living in the city. Now let's get into the cons. Con number 1. More competition equals more expensive cost of living per square foot. There's just unfortunately no way of getting around it when it comes to a higher cost of living when you're living in a more densely populated area. But with that said, that's also why you should be taking advantage of all those city perks that we talked about earlier. Do I need to sip this, or are you understanding the assignment? Con number 2, lack of outdoor living areas. I live in San Diego, and that means we pretty much have great weather all year round. So living in the city usually means you're limited to small balconies or patios when it comes to enjoying the sun at the comfort of your home. Con number 3, parking. Have you ever visited a friend and had to circle the block just to find parking? Maybe you even crashed and woke up to a parking ticket. I know a lot of my friends can definitely relate to that. My bad, guys. Con number 4, noise. Noise is just part of the life when it comes to living in the city. And it can also happen at all hours of the day and into the night. You also have all the city sounds of ambulances, buses, the hustle and bustle of people just walking around. Or maybe you even have that neighbor just banging on your wall just because your music is loud. Con number 5, and this one is for the homeowners. The lack of renovations you're able to do when you're living in a building. For us, we had a wall in our condo that we wanted to take down to create a more open space floor plan. Unfortunately, that wall was load bearing, so there was nothing we really could do about it. So the most amount of renovations we could do was just change out materials and paint. Alright suburbs, now it's your turn. Let's talk about some of the pros of living that suburban life. Pro number 1, affordability and lower cost of living. Honestly, this is one of 2 of the main reasons we decided to move from the city to the suburbs. You really do just get more bang for your buck. We ended up with almost 3 times more square footage without paying 3 times more in price. Pro number 2, more space inside and out. The second main reason we moved from the city to the suburbs, aside from that extra square footage for lower costs, was for a backyard space. We love to entertain, and again, being in sunny San Diego, we knew that an outdoor area to host and gather with our family and friends was important to us. And remember the cons of parking in the city? Definitely not a problem here in the suburbs. No tickets either. Pro number 3, peace and quiet. There's just something about enjoying the slow pace of life when you're getting older. Now I know that I said a pro for living in the city was that lively atmosphere, but there's always a time and place for everything, and right now we're definitely enjoying the calm, peace, and quiet life. Pro number 4, more community-based areas filled with nature. One of the things I love most about the suburbs is being closer to more parks, nature, and trails. I love to run and hike, and I have access to all that here. I love waking up early in the morning, going for a morning hike, taking in the nature, and saying hi to all those around the community doing the same thing. Pro number 5. Again, this one is for the homeowners out there. More flexibility when it comes to renovations. The ability to change the look of our home, whether that's structural or through renovations, add extra square footage, or even build the backyard of our dreams was a huge selling point for us moving back to the suburbs. And for us, we were able to knock down a wall to create extra space in our primary bedroom. But more importantly, for people like my brother, he's currently building an ADU in his backyard right now. And that's because his family needs have changed and they just need that extra space for loved ones. Alright, so just like the city, the suburbs come with cons too, so let's get into it. Con number 1, not many walking opportunities to restaurants and cafes. This was probably the biggest adjustment we had to make. As someone who loves to just go walk to a restaurant, to a bar, to meet up and hang out with friends, now in the suburbs, we have to pretty much drive anywhere for entertainment. And to top it off, a lot of these places are franchise eateries. Now, there's nothing really wrong with franchise eateries, but honestly, I kinda just miss those trendy bars and restaurants. Con number 2, it can honestly be boring at times. Remember how I told you to enjoy your city more than tourists do? I can tell you now that tourists aren't coming to our restaurants or parks. Living in the suburbs, we tend to stay in more, and honestly, it can be really boring at times. Con number 3, lack of amenities. I really miss having a pool or a gym. I mean, we could buy a pool, but it's just so expensive, and it also takes a lot to maintain. As far as the gym goes, our one gym close to us is always packed, so we ended up having to resort to creating our own garage gym. The only thing about that though is kinda hits different when you're working out in summer with no AC in there. Con number 4, having to drive everywhere. Remember when I said we had to drive for some entertainment, for a night out, dinner, meet with friends, etc.? Well, that pretty much applies to everything in the suburbs. Need to grab eggs? Gotta drive. Want to go grab some coffee? Gotta drive. And finally, con number 5, less housing options to choose from. When it comes to the city, a single building could have multiple listing opportunities for you to get into, but in the suburbs, you can go miles without seeing another listing. And then to top it off, sometimes it can be challenging finding a home that checks off all your must-haves when you're looking for the right home. And sometimes, unfortunately, you have to be willing to compromise and maybe adjust your expectations a bit. Alright, so those are my pros and cons for living in the city versus the suburbs. Obviously, it's subjective, and I encourage you to make your own pros and cons list so that you can figure out what is right for you. But I will say, as someone who has enjoyed both lifestyles, the pros definitely outweigh the cons by a mile. Pun intended. Honestly, it's really just a matter of the lifestyle you want to live and where you're at in this crazy journey we call life. Alright, that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you guys for joining my little tea session. If you are interested in the other episodes in this series, I'm going to link those down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye everyone.